Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. It's Tuesday. It's time for another technical topic, and here's the topic for today: screen organization in Cscape. Now, screen organization is a topic we probably haven't emphasized enough in our training as well as in our Technical Tuesdays, but we're going to rectify that today. Now, this is a video that I did pre-record because of my travel schedule, but rest assured, if you're watching this Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we are streaming it live, and we do have people standing by to answer any questions you have. If you're watching it on replay, of course, give us your questions in the comment section, and we'll go ahead and get those answered. All right, let's dive right in. Here's how we're breaking down the topic for today. Why organize your screens? We're going to be talking about these screen organization capabilities in Cscape and why do it in the first place. We're also going to show you the tools that you can use to accomplish this. Of course, we're going to demonstrate them for you, and we're going to give you some additional hints and recommendations, not only when using these tools to organize your screens, but also for developing user interface in general. Let's answer that question, why organize your screens? Well, very quickly, as you're developing an application, your screens can kind of get away from you, at least in terms of the number of screens that you've developed and how they're organized, finding them, those sorts of things. And with the Horner OCS products, they support a large number of screens potentially. Okay, so even if you're using our Micro OCS product, which is our entry level, in theory, you could have as many as 250 user screens you could develop. And with our other series, including the XL series, you've got 4 times as many available to you. So that means that it could get unruly, and you could be spending a lot of time kind of scrolling around looking for that particular screen that you want to edit, and that's something that you don't want to have happen. So with Cscape Screen Organization, it really makes it easier to maintain applications that have lots of screens, okay? Not only when you're deploying the application the first time, but also when you're maintaining the application over time. It also helps you organize your applications which have a lot of similar screens. So you may end up having 2 or 3 screens, or maybe even more, that look very similar, but they're not exactly the same. And you could accidentally go in and edit the wrong one and then have to waste a bunch of time undoing those changes. You don't want that to have happen. And then as you are going through your project, again, whether you're initially deploying the project or whether this is development for, say, making a change on down the line sometime, and if you want to find a particular screen, if you've organized your screens, you can quickly recall that particular screen in no time. You're not going to waste your time navigating around hunting for that particular screen that needs an edit. Okay, so let's take a look at those screen organizational tools in Cscape. Basically, you start in the Cscape graphics editor, which makes sense. That's where you do all your screen development. And as you're editing a particular screen, if you look in the upper left-hand corner below where all the icons are, you'll see that there is a screen name area as well as a group area. Let's focus on screen name first. Before you start editing a screen, there is no screen name assigned to that screen. So if you go to screen number 1 and you've done nothing yet, then it's just going to say blank screen like you see there on the thumbnail. Now, as soon as you start editing that screen, adding content to it, Cscape is going to assign it a default name based on its screen number. So if it's screen number 1, its default name is going to be screen 1. If it's screen number 20, its default name is going to be screen 20. That's as soon as you start adding content to a particular screen. Now, in addition to having the ability to assign more meaningful names to your screens, you can also assign them to groups. Groups of like screens or groups of screens that have, are maybe tied to a particular function. There is a single default group called main that's available, and any screens that get created by default are going to be assigned to the main group. And if you've only got a few screens, that's not a big deal. But if you've got dozens of screens, for instance, you're not going to want them all to be in the same group. That would not make it a whole lot easier to find the screen you're looking for. As you decide to add groups to your project, you're going to want to press the Edit Groups button. Okay, so that's the button to the left of where the group names are shown. And by pressing that, you're going to invoke the Group Tag Editor. And that's where you can add additional groups as well as edit the ones that you've previously created. And again, the whole point is to create group names that are logical. That makes it easy later for you to find what you're looking for. Similarly, as you name your screens, you're going to need to press the Add Edit Screen Tag button. And that's going to pull up a dialog that's going to allow you to not only assign meaningful names and create meaningful names to a particular screen, but also to assign it to a particular group. So that's the function of the Add Edit Screen Tag button. Now keep in mind that as you assign names to each screen, they do need to be unique. All right, so you can't have the same screen name being used by multiple screens. Okay, now let's say you have a scenario where you've created a screen and then you've decided you want to put it in a different location. Maybe you've started on screen number 10 and you've decided, oh, I'm going to move that to be screen number 3 now. And so you've copied and pasted all the contents from screen 10 to screen 3, and now screen 10 is blank. You have the ability to effectively blank out that screen again that's no longer being used by pressing the Remove Screen Tag button. So the default screen name of screen 10 in this example will be effectively deleted, and that screen will go back to just being a blank screen. So that can be useful when you're kind of cleaning up things at the end. Now, after you've created your screen groups and you've named your screens and you've assigned those screens to groups, what does that get me? What is the advantage of doing that? Well, it really comes into play because you can now use your Cscape Project Navigator tool to navigate through all of your screen groups and to the different screens within those groups and quickly zero in and find that screen that you want to view or edit. So no longer do you just have to randomly open the graphics editor and then just kind of scroll from screen to screen looking for that particular screen you want to edit. You can use the Project Navigator tool to be able to quickly drill down to find that screen. Now, for those of you who haven't used the Project Navigator before, or you don't have it kind of as a permanent fixture in your workspace, here's how you call up the Project Navigator. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. From the Tools menu, you can just click on Project Navigator, or if you've got the icons all in your main Cscape workspace, you can find the Project Navigator icon and make sure that it is toggled to the on position. And then that will cause the Project Navigator to appear, and then you can basically size and dock that Project Navigator wherever you like to have it. Now in my case, I like to have it along the left side, but not everybody has the same preferences that I do. All right, let's go ahead and do a demonstration of using screen organization. All right, so let's go ahead and fire up Cscape. So I've got a project here that I have used for the last couple of weeks. And that is a project I developed, an application I developed for turning an XLE into a remote I/O block for Ethernet IP. And for the last 2 weeks, I have kind of, part of the project has been the user interface. On the first week, when we first introduced this to you, I showed one style of user interface to solve this application. And then last week, I used the menu object to do things a little bit differently. But going back to a couple weeks ago, I want to show you how I have organized the screens for this project. So I just went ahead and called up the graphics editor, and it's automatically pulled up with the default screen, which in this case was screen 20, not screen 1 in this instance. But if I want to take a look at, using the thumbnail tool here, if I want to take a look at all the different screens that were developed for this project, you'll see that there were a number of them. Somewhere in the 20 to 30 range were developed. And a lot of them look the same or look similar. So finding the right particular screen that I would want to edit could be a chore if I don't go ahead and utilize the screen organization feature. So let me show you how I've done that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go back to screen number 1. I'm sorry, to the first page of screens, which is screen number 20. So for this particular screen, of course, when I first edited it, it had a default name of screen 20, because that's the screen number. But I went ahead and I assigned it a meaningful name, which in this case was Power Up. So this is my Power Up screen, and I went ahead and left it in the main group, okay, because that's really where this particular screen fit. But in looking at this application, what screen groups made sense? Now keep in mind, for this application, the whole function of this application is to allow any customer that has an XLE of any model, model 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, to effectively use that XLE as an Ethernet IP remote I/O block. But depending on the model you're using, you're going to have a different set of user screens to show the I/O for that particular model, because every model has a little different I/O mix. So as we look at these sets of screens, there's a different set of screens for every XLE model. So creating group names based on the XLE model made sense in this case, in my particular application. In your application, you're going to do something differently. Maybe you'll want a group for setup, and a group for maintenance, and a group for the loader on the machine, and maybe a group for the unloader on the machine, or the oven that is a part of the machine. Whatever your application has, more than likely there's going to be logical groups of screens that you're going to want to create. Okay, so let's take a look at the groups I've created, and I'll go ahead and click on the Edit Group button here. And here's what I have. I've left the main group alone, and then I have a model 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and those are the ones that made sense in my application. Of course, yours will vary. So those are the groups that I had. And then for all these different screens, I assigned names that would make sense. This is the LAN setup screen for model 2. Now again, the names you assign to individual screens have to be unique. So I happen to have a setup screen for each of the different models based on the type of navigation that I did. So I have to make sure that each of these LAN setup screens has a unique name. So I assigned, or I put a couple extra characters at the end to kind of indicate what group this was part of, at least to give it a unique name. So now once I've done that, now when I exit out of the graphics editor and I take a look at my project navigator, now if I go to the graphics section here and I expand it, it shows me all my different groups, main through model 6, and I can expand individual ones to take a look at the screens that are assigned to a particular group. And if I want to very quickly find a particular screen, let's say I want to take a look at the second digital input screen on my model 4, I can double click here and very quickly get to that screen and do any editing that I need to do, being assured that if I've grouped and named my screens appropriately, I can be assured I'm editing the proper screen. So that's always important. Now, one other thing I want to show you kind of from a cleanup standpoint, and that is, if we take a look at the main group, you'll notice I've got a power up screen and I've got screen 101. So that's a screen that still has a default name. And since I've intentionally named all my screens that I'm using, this is a bit of a clue, having a screen that's got its default name still. So if I double click on this, I can see that, hey, this is a screen that at one point had some content, but that content has been erased, and it's basically a blank screen that's no longer blank effectively. It's kind of been assigned a default name, and it's been assigned to the main group. So what I can do is utilize this Remove Screen Tags button here, and now I've fully restored this to a blank screen by eliminating the tag or the name associated with this screen. So now when I go back into my project navigator and I go back to the main group here, I can see that, yep, that blank screen is now gone, And so now I've got a nice tidied up group of screens, or groups of screens with individual screen names. So that is really the features you can use to group your screens and name your screens. And by having the ability to access them from the Project Navigator, now it's much easier to find the screen that you're looking for. There's one more thing I want to cover with you today, and that is I want to give you some hints and recommendations around screen organization. Now, first of all, in general, you should always have a plan for your user interface. Keep in mind, you can spend countless hours working on your user interface, and you'll be much more efficient if you basically sketch it out ahead of time. That you create an outline on paper for what you want your screens to look like, which screens you're going to need, how the screen navigation is going to work, how the user is going to navigate from screen to screen, all those sorts of things. If you work that out ahead of time by creating an outline, you're going to find that you're going to very efficiently execute the user interface development portion of your project. If you just kind of wing it, you'll get the job done eventually, but you may spend a lot of time wasting time. So that's definitely a hint that I recommend. And then of course, once you've done that outline, then it makes perfect sense, and it is a lot easier to determine logical groupings of screens and assign those group names and determine logical screen names as well. And remembering the case that all screen names have to be unique. So if you have screens that are similar to each other but a little different, you need to make sure they have unique names. Now there's a couple scenarios I want to review with you quickly where organization is critical, and that's applications with a large number of screens, because you can waste a ton of time just hunting around looking for that screen that you want to edit, okay, if you don't take advantage of these organization features. The second application where it's important is where you have screens that have similar, or an application where you have a lot of similar looking screens. Even if it's only 2 or 3 that are similar but not exactly the same, you could go in and edit completely the wrong screen and then find it out later, and now you're going to have to do a bunch of work to undo what you just did. So assign those names, assign them to groups, make sure when you do that, you're going to make sure that you can access the correct screen and edit the correct screen. That's what I wanted to review with you today. Again, this was a pre-recorded video, but if you're watching this live on Tuesday, as we stream it live, we have had people standing by to answer your questions in the chat section. If you're watching this on replay, we'll get those questions answered from the comment section just as soon as we can. But before we close, I have a couple things to review with you. First of all, once again, we're here every Tuesday, either 100% live or streaming a video live, answering questions. Also, some of you may be wondering what's coming for the rest of the schedule for May and beyond. Well, you can always check our website for a complete schedule of the upcoming live streams and webinars. And you can always keep an eye out for our monthly newsletters, which also details what our programs are looking like for the month. Now, some of you may have tuned in today expecting to see more helpful Horner hacks. And you're saying, wow, this isn't what I expected. I've got a screen organization topic instead. Well, here's what happened. Basically, as I was reviewing some of the hacks that I was planning to cover with you, a lot of them were Cscape related. And I talked to Nate Beachy, and he revealed to me about some of the awesome things he does to be more efficient in Cscape, and I would consider those hacks for sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to expand upon the hacks in Cscape that you can use to be more productive, and we're going to cover that in a 2-part series either towards the end of May or maybe even after that this summer sometime. So we're going to make it really worth your while, but you're going to have to stay tuned and just wait a little bit longer for that particular topic. Now, the last thing I want to cover with you before we sign off is I want to ask you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. It doesn't cost anything, and if you choose notifications, you'll be notified every time that we go live or every time we post a new video. All right, thanks for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.